We back. Welcome to the AM with MIC LAWRY. I have a special guest today, songwriter, vocal arranger, singer, artist, Simone Skye. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Appreciate you. Did I miss anything when I said that? Is there anything?
Now, freshly, producer, engineer,
producer,
all of that. Yeah.
Oh, all right. So we got more to add to that. That's dope. That was my first question. Is there anything that I'm missing? So that's good. I appreciate your time. I thank you for giving me at least 30 to an hour of your time in your day. I just want to tell you that first. I appreciate it. And a real question that I always ask everybody: how are you doing today?
Great. Today is a really good day. It's Friday for me. And so I actually have a little bit of time to myself. I got a lot of mixing and stuff to do today. So it's actually a good day. I got a free day today.
Dope. All right, that's good to know. And before I dig into anything, I don't even know this. So I want to ask you this before I dig to the music stuff. Are you from Houston?
Not, I'm not.
Where are you from?
Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And actually, I took a little bit of a train to get to Houston, like a little bus route to get to Houston. I went to Hampton University, and I paid for Hampton University. Me and my mom paid basically out of pocket. And so anybody that's gone to Hampton knows exactly how expensive that is. You're talking 20, 25K a year easy, right, for Hampton. And so I got all the way to like junior year, and my mom couldn't keep it up, and I was working 2 jobs and going to school full time. And my grandmother was like, all the family is down here in Texas now because everybody moved down to Texas. Almost my entire family moved down to Houston. And they were like, you already had gotten into TSU, just come on down to TSU and we'll finish up. And that's what I did. And so I ended up taking this path from like Detroit to Virginia. I took a brief little stint in Vegas. I lived in Vegas for a little bit of time. And then I came out to Houston, and the very first year that at my birthday, I moved down in like August, I think, of 2007-ish. And that January, my grandfather barbecued on my birthday. My birthday is January 17th. And from that moment on, I was like, I'm never leaving. Like, you're gonna have to pry Texas from my cold hands. Like, there's no way I'm gonna leave. And I didn't. That was the turning point for me. Because my last birthday before that, it was 2 degrees. That was the high. And so
you don't miss the cold?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Give me the warm weather. I will deal with the heat. I got air conditioning for that. It's fans. I'm okay. And so I ended up in Houston, and I just never left. I haven't found a place that feels like home the way that Houston has felt like home. And so this is the place.
We share the same story there. I'm actually from Milwaukee, which is the Midwest. And I actually moved to Virginia as well. So I was at Newport News and Hampton a lot in my early 20s. Now, I didn't want to go back to school, so I knew I wasn't going to Hampton. But that's a whole nother story. But between Hampton, Norfolk, Newport News, I was around there a lot for, I'll say, a good 2.5 years before I moved to Houston. But long story short, I got bad grades in Wisconsin because I was doing music. I wasn't in class, and I got kicked out on academic probation. And my mom was like, you got a week to find a job or I'm coming to get you. Because she didn't want me to be back in Milwaukee, like without supervision, even though I was grown, because it was so crazy. And I'm like, I ain't about to find no job in a week. She was like, you don't find no job, I'm coming to get you. And sure enough, that's what she did. And I didn't want to go to Virginia. I'm like, I ain't know nothing about it. But it was pretty cool. But like you said, I love Houston. When I moved down here, I was like, I don't want to move anywhere. But I do miss the weather, though. I do miss that cold weather.
I don't. You're on your own on that one.
Well, I'm not on my own because, we just had this little snowstorm, as they call it, and they was going crazy.
It's for one day. Only people that go crazy over that is people that have not experienced it for long stints of time. And it's so funny because I was actually in New York for that weekend. And so I left New York and they had snow when I was down there for those couple of days and came directly back. And then we got snow. And I was like, I don't know what is happening, but I don't like any of this. So we need to immediately. So I'm happy it's warmed back up now. I'm done.
Yeah. Like you said, 1-2 days we was out of there. But yeah, shouts out to the Houstonians. I know y'all love that. So I'm gonna dig right into it. Simple question that I ask people, and if it takes you a little time to gather this, it's all right. But at what age and what moment in your life did you know you were doing music? Like, this is what I want to do. If you know the specific age that you were or the specific moment.
I do. I was riding in my mom's back seat, and I don't remember what song was on, but I asked my mom, and she apologized for it. But I asked my mom, "Mommy, do you think I could be a singer?" And I had to have been maybe no more than like 7, 8. She was like, "Well, I mean, I guess you could be whatever you want to be, but maybe think about something else." And it was something about her telling me no that I think made me decide that immediately I'm going to go and do the thing. And so it started with poetry, right? And I grew up church kid, heavy church kid. Okay. If you in Detroit for real, you probably a church kid. Like, that's kind of how Detroit is. But like I started with poetry because it was approved, right? That was like an approved thing that you could do in church. And then in the middle of doing choirs and everything else, as I grew up in singing in choirs and everything, I had my own little core circle of friends, and all of us decided that we wanted to do music, but I was only allowed to do gospel. And so that was probably around 16-ish years old that I started actually recording and realizing I like that. Like, I genuinely like it. And we only had like this little bitty mixer, and I think it had 8 channels. And you had to bounce every time you got done with it. Like, you couldn't, move all that digital stuff. Wasn't it, right? For like the $100 that people had at that point. But like, we had a little 8 channel, and you could just do whatever it was, and then you had to bounce it down and do whatever it was and bounce it down. And so that sort of like process of kind of doing it that rough way made me, when I got later, right, and start getting access to other things, I realized exactly how much I loved it, because that was a lot of work for a little payoff, because that first project was terrible, but it was what let me know that I actually could do it. And kind of changed the direction a bit of, what I decided I was going to do, because I had to sneak and change my major and everything in college.
So you said eventually your mother had to apologize. What did she apologize about?
Yeah, she apologized because, and while the world is a bit crazy now, what I can say is, at least for our folk, um, we're growing a lot as far as what healthiness looks like in parenting, right? We're not getting it right 100%, but we're growing a lot. And so much later on in life, this probably would have been maybe about 10 years or something ago. I did a Motown show. I did the Motown and More review that happens every year. And that was my mom's first time, what she viewed as successful, right? Mm. She actually viewed as being successful. And I had brought up to her after she, saw that event, that she kind of like pushed me off with like saying, I think, well, I just want you to kind of think of something else, right? And she apologized for that. And she was like, you have to remember that we grew up in Detroit, and I had a father that drove the bus for 40 years, right? And so our thing was, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a degree, and you get a good job that you can take care of your family and you can take care of yourself. And so hearing you say that you wanted to go be a singer that has no, guidelines or rules about, you could do that for your whole life and never get anything out of it, right? It just made it, at that time, it would make me just, shrivel up as a parent, because I don't want you just out here being a starving artist. And so she did end up saying, like, I see why it is that you want to do it, and that you made the decision regardless of who was going to back you. Because they even did an intervention. My family did an intervention on me about music. But even though you had to, kind of tell us, I'm going to do it regardless of if you like it or not, I'm glad that you decided to do something that you wanted to do. And so that was a big jump, for our mamas saying, I'm sorry about something is That's a serious thing. That's a serious thing. So that's what ended up happening. And she apologized and it felt good, right? It felt like, I'm glad that you saw what that was, but technically it helped me. So, it ended up being a win in the end anyway.
No, so two questions with that. These weren't on the list, but I'm just curious, and this goes for me. I'm kind of asking myself too. So, do you feel like in the moment she saw what it was because of the bright lights and the way people received you? Like, what made her get it then?
I believe that because success is so different for different people, for her, it wasn't until she saw that there was a possibility that I could actually do something that would make me money. She didn't know if I was getting paid or not being paid. But to people that don't necessarily live in the entertainment industry, being on a stage and seeing 20,000 people around you feels like success to them, right? Now, when you're in the entertainment business, you know that you could be on a whole bunch of stages and, 20,000 people and get $5 a piece, right? But for her, I think it was the actual view of like, oh, this can make money. And she is doing a thing that looks successful to an outside, entertainment person. So I think that was for her because she had already seen me get signed and, record and work with all kind of people and all this other stuff. And that really wasn't it. It was the day that but she had never been to a show before. She had never seen me on stage before. And so that was her first time. It was her and my aunts. And I think my grandparents came out too, but they ended up coming out to the show. And that was really her first time actually seeing me as an artist, because I keep that very much separate from everything else. And so, I think that just kind of changed it because she could see where it might go.
Right. Okay. And then my other question to that is, do you, and I speak for myself here too, but do you think our parents, as much as they felt like the music industry wasn't for us, and like you say, you need to get a regular job, I personally feel like they weren't even informed because we weren't. I'm still finding out stuff about the industry that I wish I had known 10 to 15 years ago. So I know back then when they were coming up, they weren't as informed. So do you feel like they were just programmed to just work?
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because, my family is a serious blue collar family. And like in Detroit, you basically kind of like choose a car company and that's your family's car company. And so my family was GM. That's what everybody had. It was, if you came in with a Ford, the fix or repair daily, it was going to be a problem, right? That you didn't drive certain cars because you got GM cars and you worked for GM. My mom worked for GM for a while. She painted the underside of the cars. So they used to put her in what they call the pit, I think, or the hole. And she used to paint the other underside of the cars. My dad worked in that industry. Like everyone in Detroit worked in the car industry. And if you weren't working in the car industry, you're probably in some level of transportation. And so my grandfather drove those city buses for the entirety of basically his time in Detroit. And so it was serious blue collar. Like Motown existed, but that existed far before little me decided that she wanted to do music, right? And so maybe in the time that it was that age, that might have been something, but also contextually, my area and neighborhood got hit very hard by the crack epidemic in like the 70s, 80s. And so there's 7 children from my grandfather. They had 7 kids, my grandmother and grandfather. And so they watched a lot of their friends who had all those singing groups in Detroit that they would have all the time. Everybody had singing groups and, they had a lot of talent. And I got in the intervention. These were the stories that I ended up having to hear, that they just ended up cracked out and living on the streets. Right.
Wow.
They also had, not only was it we're blue collar workers, in our, family, just in general, to be able to be successful. But also there was trauma, right? Because they saw friends of theirs who wanted to do music, who had beautiful voices and all of these different talents and everything else, just get swallowed up by the industry, right? Some of them even made it, right? And they just ended up getting swallowed up by the industry. And so there was trauma that was associated with that too, with, are you going to be okay? Right. Later, as an adult, now a parent, I get where that fear comes from of like, are you going to be okay? But I also understand that like part of the parenting and the family journey is being able to allow your children to be who they are and not who you want them to be, because they are their own little people. And so it kind of ended up being that, but it took a little while and I didn't end up that way. And, Lord willing, we keep the same path, and I keep my head on my shoulders and make good decisions, and we make certain that we move in that direction.
Word. So also to add to that, it's probably full circle for your mom hearing what you just said with Motown, how she grew up, and then you doing the Motown the way it is now. It's not like Detroit, but it was probably a lot of feelings going through that moment for your mom, right? Daughter up there, Motown, that's
Yep.
dope. Okay, so fast forward, right? Like you leave Hampton, shouts out to VA. I love Seven Cities. But you leave VA and you come down, you say you had a Vegas stint, and then you come down to Houston. What, if you remember, what year is that, and what is the culture and the vibe like of Houston when you first moved down here?
So it was very brief in Vegas. So I actually moved there because of my family's intervention. I was signed at the time. I was signed to management under HITS committee with Huey and all the rest of that. So I was signed.
Let's talk about that. Sorry to cut you off. How did that even happen?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody kind of remembers the time frame of when the book The Secret came out, and when people really started talking about manifestation and everything else. So that book had literally like just come out. I read the book and I followed the directions and I wrote down, I'll be signed by, and I forgot if I gave a timeline, but I'm going to be signed. I'm signed. I'm signed. I'm signed. 2 days after I did that, I'm out with my cousin. Now, everybody has that one cousin that's like your brother cousin or your sister cousin. It's the one that y'all always in trouble together. So I'm out with my cousin, my sister cousin, and she's one of those people that's like, she'll talk to anybody. Like she'll talk to anybody. I'm shy. I look like I'm just like a mean face person, but I'm not. I'm super shy. And so I don't talk to a lot of people when I go out like that. But she does. And she ends up talking to this guy, right? And I don't know how she ends up getting on the conversation, but she turns around and goes, my cousin sings. You need to talk to my cousin. My cousin sings. And the guy turns around and goes, you sing? And I say, yeah, I do. And he said, well, come by tomorrow. I want to meet you. I want to hear what you have. Right. And so we end up going to this house, young and unsafe. Okay. Because the version of me now, like, I'm not going to nobody's house. But when you like, 19, 20-ish, that seems like, nothing. And especially in Detroit, everybody was always at folks' house because it's safer to just be at people's houses. But we end up going over there. And it's just a really nice house. They got the big screen downstairs, and they're like, all right, let me hear some of the stuff you have. And I let them hear some of my stuff, which at that point was a little bit more polished than what it was before. It's not now, but it was, you could tell that I had a little something on me, right? And lo and behold, come to find out, this person is the person that handles the A&R for HITS committee under Jive. Named Mike. I can't think of Mike's last name. I'm sorry if you see this. Posted up, you said I can't remember your last name. Meeting Mike, and he signed me. So within 2 days of me like doing the manifestation thing and saying I'm going to be signed, I had a contract in front of me. Now, was it a great contract? It wasn't, but it was a contract, and it was my first true experience of having like a machine behind me. And so my family was not happy about that because, again, it's not gospel. I'm not singing no Jesus songs. And so I hid it. I didn't say that I had done the thing. I just said that I was doing music. And so it ended up being that all of Tierra Marie's songs, because she had just recently been released from Rockefeller, I got those songs. I inherited those songs. And my first single was actually supposed to be Leaving Tonight. And most people know that song because it is Neo and Jennifer Hudson. I got that song first. But Dream Girls came out. I had already started recording it. So it was supposed to be a song with me and Neo as my first single to come out. And Dream Girls came out. And I guess Jennifer heard the song and she ended up getting the song. And I was sick about it because I heard it when I went to Vegas. I heard it on the radio. And
that's supposed to be me.
But that's how it ended up happening. So I ended up getting signed, and I got like the full experience of what it's like to be on a label. Like at that time, that's 2007. Like labels are moving. Okay, so they're pushing. There's money behind it. You getting signing bonuses. You got all kind of teams behind you. And so I was recording songs and doing all these things and getting ready for different shows and photo shoots and everything else. And then everybody knows Pop Lock and Drop It. That was the Hits Committee song, right? So that was the time that I got signed to that same group, right? And there were 3 artists in Detroit that they signed. One guy from Flint, a young girl named Asia Cruz, and myself in Michigan that they had signed. When he disappeared, because everybody, I think people kind of remember, if you're in the music industry, that there was like this stint of time where no one could find him. Like they were talking about, I remember hearing it, like he was unable to be found. They couldn't locate him. It's just like he left, just disappeared. Because of that, everything on our roster just stopped. All movement stopped for us. And so they didn't do any more recording. They weren't returning our phone calls. Any of the artists that were there in Michigan, they weren't returning any of our phone calls. All those things that they said we were going to be starting up, they just stopped talking to us. And during that time, I ended up, getting into TSU, and I was moving down here. And so my first maybe like 6 months or so, I actually had my sister, who's an attorney, just send a letter and say, write something up for me. And she was like, I'm not your attorney. I'm not in Texas, but I'll write an email up and just send an email out and say, if I don't hear back from you about this particular, contract, that it's just that you'll let me out of it, because I had like another year or something. And my only option would have been to not do any music in Houston at all until after my contract was up, or to see if they would let me go. And so I took the shot, and I'd already sat down here. I couldn't do anything. And so I took the shot, sent the email, and I didn't hear back. And normally I would hear back via email. And so I took that as, okay, y'all are letting me off the hook, because that main person, that's your moneymaker, right? And so he just kind of dipped off. And so that freed me up for Houston.
Okay. Question for you. So you were what, 19 when you signed this first contract?
I was 20.
20? Okay. Did you talk to anybody before you signed?
Not. Absolutely not. I signed on that paper so fast.
Do you regret that? Or do you like, I would do it all over again? I was 20.
No, the only thing is, because I'm an adult now, I understand the what ifs. Like, what if I had really disreputable, low character people that I was working with? The good thing was, while I may not have liked the way that the ending was on the, relationship, I was never in a place where I felt unsafe. Right? Unsafe as an artist, like I couldn't be myself, unsafe as a woman, because that's a whole other thing when you're in the industry. I honestly felt like they wanted to get really good talent, and they were going to do as right by them as the music industry allows you to be. And we know how that is. So I do not regret it, because I really did end up being the exception to the rule at that point. I learned my lesson later. But, at that point, I really did end up being the exception to the rule, and allowing me to understand that, like, it actually could be good if you sign, to someone and they have really good morals and character.
Oh, and then rest in peace, Huey, because he passed some years back, right? Yeah, rest in peace. So with that said, now that changes my question for Houston. But I'm gonna kind of slide this in there. But if it comes to mind, bring it up. If not, you move to Houston. I'm wondering, do you have the big head now? Like, I got signed. Do you have that? Okay, so you don't. So you come to Houston now. As far as music and the culture, what's that? It's bringing me back so many memories now. I was actually supposed to go to college in Michigan, Ferris State. I remember driving there but we didn't go. So it's crazy. You're giving me a whole lot of thoughts. But you move here. I can only imagine if you were listening to music, you had your thoughts of what Houston was. But what is that, the music culture like when you first moved down here?
So I didn't. I was super sheltered. Like the first time that I ever even saw someone that had locks was when I went to Virginia for my freshman year of college. And so like the level of sheltered and like awareness of just people in general outside of Detroit was minimal. Um, but also I grew up in a family that music was looked down on. And so I think because of that, it always made me have a lot more humbleness about doing it. Like there is no big head, number one, because you need to hide that you're doing it. So be quiet about the fact that you do in the first place. So when you grow up and see, I grew up in at Greater Grace. And so I grew up around voices that now people know, right? So like I was in the choir and singing next to Anisha and Antea Burchett and all of them. Like I grew up with them, right? Tim Slaughter was my choir director, right? So all these people that are like Anisha wrote to Mia's song that everybody does the dance that they don't know the steps to, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like Fred Hammond played the drums when he was growing up, right? At my church. And so when you grow up around those sorts of voices and you realize that your voice doesn't sound like them, right? I've never sounded like Kiki Sheard, right? Or Kiera Sheard. Like that's just not how I sounded. There's a level of insecurity and discomfort that comes from feeling like you don't fit in what the people around you say that you have to sound like to sound good and make music. And so it really has not mattered. It's benefited me in the long run because it means that I get to work with a lot of people. They don't have bad taste in their mouth from working with me. But it definitely makes a difference in having a group of people that tell you how great you are and you're continuing to do it. To have like, I had my music teacher in college literally tell me, you should just go and do something else. This is not for you, right? And that was my vocal teacher at Hampton. And so that allowed me to, regardless of where it was that I showed up to, I just showed up as I'm going to be the weakest link here. Like that's what my mindset was. I'm going to be the weakest link here. And so I need to act like I'm the weakest link and I need to work harder than everybody in the room because I don't want them to feel like I'm holding them back. And so I didn't have that when I got here. I did not hear Houston's music for real until I got to Hampton. And I heard screw music for the first time. And the first time I was like, again, church kid, is this demonic? What do y'all got going on? But then I heard like the second song was like, I like this, right? And so when I got to Houston, the energy here as a 20-year-old, where Houston was a different place. Like it wasn't $20 to get into everything. It was just fun. Okay. Like you just had fun out here. And so when I got out here, that's how I ended up meeting somebody, meeting my la Toisson. But I ended up like just having this big group of friends that mostly were from Houston, that everybody did music. And all of a sudden I felt like I fit in a place. Like I found some people and I fit there. And the type of music that I liked making, they liked making too. And some of them had to hide because they was church kids too. And so we bonded over those things. And it just ended up being like this Renaissance type of feeling personally for me, of like being in a place where I didn't have my family, their ideas of what I should be kind of like sitting on one side, and then who I thought I needed to be from being a church kid on the other, or fighting about what I looked like because of the labels, because they will stress you out about what your body looks like and what your face looks like and everything else. And it just felt really good. So I think that sort of welcoming like environment with music at the time really allowed, it probably made a lot more of the way for where I am now than what I really realized, in that moment of like, the fact that you feel like you belong here is what's going to make you keep doing this music here. And so, yeah, it was actually like my music was heavily formulated and formed by Houston. And I think most people can hear that in a lot of my stuff now, but I started music in Detroit, but I really made music when I got to Houston. And so the sounds and everything else are really what formed me as an artist out here.
That's dope. Adding on to what you said, I remember when I first moved down here, because I think how I would say what you're saying is the Southern hospitality, right? So when I first moved down here, down here they talk to you and they touch you. And I got very defensive when somebody like I'm like, hey, don't touch me. And they like, I'm just talking to you. I'm like, well, just talk to me then. Don't touch me. Like, it was like, it reminded me of back home immediately. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm a chill guy, but like, that's one of those things that have set me off. Like, and I have to learn because I do it now too. Like, hey, but with that said, the people that you met, did you meet them in college or was it somewhere else? Because I want to talk about networking, because people are very receiving down here, especially if they think you dope, right? But they'll speak. Back home, it ain't so much like that. It's like a stare down before I'm trying to figure you out. So where did you meet these people?
That's actually a really good question. Funny that you said stare down, because for you, it was the touching. For me, it was the eye contact. Making eye contact with somebody, you want to fight them. So coming down here and they're just looking at you in your face. And I'm like, why? I don't even know you. Why do you want to fight me? So that definitely was a bit of a culture shock. So for me, yes, I met just about everyone. My path to Houston music happened in college. It happened in the music department building. That's where my path to music started, because my path before that was the actual labels. I didn't have to go any place to look for anyone, right? Everybody that I was going to be connected to, they brought. That's how I got the song, with Neo, and I got these other songs. I didn't have to go and look. I didn't have to try. I didn't have to talk to nobody and make friends with them or anything. And so I was skillless when it came to that part of it. And being in literally walking into the building, that first time I walked into the building, and it's just a whole bunch of these music kids, right? Because I actually snuck and changed my major in Hampton. I didn't tell my mom. I went for radio because I had been doing radio since I was 12 in Detroit. And so she would allow me to go to Hampton if I went for radio. She wouldn't let me go if I went to music. So 6 months into Hampton, I changed my major to music, and she didn't know. That was a little different experience, right? In what Hampton's music department was versus TSU's music department. It was the first time that I saw teachers that actually knew who I was. I slept through a class one day. Like, I didn't end up making a early class. And the next teacher I had a class with asked me why I wasn't in sight singing that morning. And that changed, like, it showed me that they cared about me, right? Because I had a choir class. I'm gonna say it out loud. I had a choir class at Hampton that I only went to one time, and I got an A in that class. It was a choir, like, meaning I'm in there singing every day, and I went one day, and I passed, right? And so to come to TSU, and then you're walking around with all these other singing kids, and there's musicians everywhere. You got the band kids in there, because you got the band kids, and you got the opera kids, and you got the jazz kids, right? And so I was with the opera kids. So I was a classical major. And so you have all these different people that were there, and then also to have teachers that actually know where you are, really was like transformative for me. And that's where I met folks. I met groups that I would end up working with, and people that I would end up working with. And,
Come on, give me some names. Who you got?
Okay, so boom.
Let's talk.
Interview. Let me talk about this first, because you're probably going to end up bringing it up anyway. The first day I walked into the music department, I forgot what it was that I had to go in there for, but there was this loud boy, okay? He was running down the hall singing at the top of his lungs, just yelling notes at the top of his lungs, sliding up and down the halls, okay? And he ends up seeing me. I'm probably like a deer in the headlights, right? Because I don't know anybody here. It's like my first time walking into this building. And he looks at me and goes, "Who are you?" And then from there, I've never not had silence. Like, I've never not had him. He's just been there forever. And so it ended up being that like I met Silas, and then I think it might have been that he found the opportunity for a group. It was like a contest, I think it was. You had to go and audition for it. And Silas brought me. I'm almost certain that Silas is the one that brought me to it. I wasn't going to go. And Silas actually came and got me to go to it. Was outside of my apartments and was like, you better go to this thing. And like told me the time and everything else. And I ended up going, and we met Preston Middleton. And we both auditioned for it, and we ended up making the group. Me, Preston, David, and Joe. Which David still does music. Joe kind of does music. Sometimes he needs to do more, but it's 44 Joe. And we made a group, and that is where I really started like doing music in Houston. It was from that group. And I mean, everybody that was in the, music department, all of us were doing music elsewhere. And some of them were like singing at shows and open mics. And I had never done any of those things. But yeah, it all happened right there in that music building over on the side across from the math and the science building at TSU. It was there. Yeah.
That's dope. So, I mean, yeah, you answered the question. That's how you met Silas. So I don't have to ask that. I'm going to dig into our session in just a minute. But before I get that, I even want to know your origin of that. From you being an artist, how did you actually start demoing records and doing records for other people? How, because a lot of people can't make that distinction. They don't know how to do one. I work with so many people who just want the records for themselves, even though they know that they're not going to put it out. It's like, this is mine. I don't want anybody else touching it. So how did that come about?
So funny enough, I was talking about how that insecurity and all those other things play into it. It's so funny how the things that you believe are weaknesses can end up being strengths if you're intentional about them. At the time, my belief in whether or not I was actually a good singer or a good writer or any of those things was super low. And so I felt like I had to have every single skill available to me to show that I was worthy of something, right, in the music industry. And so that meant that there was not a skill that I was not going to know, right, and know how to do very well. And so writing for other people was a requirement because that's what Carrie Hilson does, right? And that's what The Dream does. And that's what Prince did. And so I have to be able to write for other people. And then being able to do vocal arrangements, that's what those same people do. And I need to be able to do those same things, right? And remember that I'm also sitting around all of these other very musical people. And I bring Preston back into it. Preston was the person that did the first demo for Destiny's Child. And so he did the Ghetto Boys, played bass for the Ghetto Boys. He, worked with all of these P-Funk. He was doing their stuff up until just some years ago, right? And so I saw all the skills that he had, and I was like, well, that means I have to have all of those skills too. And so being able to write for other people felt like something that I had to be able to do. And then when you add in that bit of insecurity of, I may not be able to be a great singer, but I can't control what my voice sounds like, but I control how good of a writer. I can control that. Right. And so any room that I'm in, I need to immediately show my skill at. Right. It was a coping response. It was really like a traumatic, insecurity type of thing of like, I need to make certain that I'm the most skilled person in the room. Right. You don't actually have to do that, but that's what I thought. Right. And so
sorry to cut you off. Do you think, because I notice all of us are like that, do you think we get that from our parents indirectly? Like they didn't tell us, okay.
Absolutely. And not just from the parents. I think in general I'll speak to being Black because that's the only thing I've ever been. But I think that we have been told that we are not good enough, even when we are the best in the room, by others from a time that we are tiny. And so when you add that into the fact that your parents were probably told a lot less kindly that they were the worst in the room, even though they were the best, you're hearing it from those people. And so they tell you that you need to be twice as good. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you learn that. and you're not just learning it, because sometimes we put just a little bit too much pressure, I think, on our own parents, because we don't look at yourself. Like, there's some things you can't keep from your children or your nieces and nephews. The Everything around us here in the US and in other places is based off of the idea that we are less than immediately. And we have to prove that we are at zero, meaning like we're not proving that we're at 5. We're proving that we're at 0, meaning that we just belong in the room. We're not proving that we're great in the room. Okay, which is why we have to do it twice as well. And so I believe that it comes from both of those places. We're also hearing that messaging from people that heard that messaging worse than us, but we're still hearing it from the first group that said that we were less than. And so when you add in that you get into these spaces and each person is different. I just ended up growing up in a very religious environment where that sort of music was already looked down on. And because they wanted to try and keep me safe from what they saw happen to other people, they told me that I couldn't do it and I probably wasn't going to do that well. And so at that compounded in, it lends to that sort of like go get it nature, which does end up making us really prolific, but you fight with the imposter syndrome every single day.
I like how you said that, because it is coping, but it turns into this powerful confidence that you still sometimes don't know you have. It's, for me, I'll use the word survival, because that was my mindset. It's like whoever's in this room is not going to leave this room saying I'm whack.
Right.
Like, what I got to go through. And that's, for me, it was a survival mentality instead of being like, I was supposed to be a leader, but I was running against it. I didn't want people not to want to work with me. And that's going to happen no matter what. Right. You know what I mean? Just be who you are. So that's dope. Okay. So I'm going to dig into this. So I'm going to pull this record up that we did. I'm curious to hear your response to it. So now, listening to you now, this reminds me of the interview with Silas. Y'all check the interview, episode 1 with Silas, so you know who we're talking about. But listening to you now, it all makes sense now. So Silas brings you into my apartment. Me and my wife now, back then we had split up, and I had my apartment on the southwest side, and she would never come because it was the hood. And I kind of felt like at home for me. I'm like, all right, it's cool. I'm going to make it an apartment, right? I mean, I'm going to make it a studio. So I had nothing going on at that apartment, but Silas bringing everybody over there to cut records, because we did everything there. I produced, I vocal arranged. That's where I kind of learned how to do it. Wrote songs, cut the song, like we did everything. So I remember when he brought you there, your look is exactly what it was. And now it makes sense, because I'm from the Midwest too. And in my mind, I'm like, what's wrong with her? Like, if she with Silas, she should know, because Silas is, everybody that doesn't know, Silas is one of the best guys in the world. He has the biggest heart, and he is so passionate about music. So I know if he's bringing somebody over, they're passionate about music. And I ain't see that on your face. So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, all right, let's see where this go. Right? Like, I'm in my mind, I'm looking at you in my mind, how you are in the real time. All right. So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's see how this goes. Silas will take care of the energy, because Silas is a big ball of energy. So I want to know, I'm going to play this, and I want to know where this derived. So I produced this, and I believe you and Silas
wrote and recorded it, I think.
Wrote it, recorded it, arranged it in a moment.
Trash. You got caught cheating, so I'ma tax that ass. Thought I wouldn't see, but you know that wouldn't last. Make you a believer who you fooling. You gon' end up losing. Got the man of flat. Those out your monkey if you right out your leather. Ask your Facebook and you Twitter. Post pictures of ugly naked. And my girl, hey, I do fuck your world. Hey,
I don't know what was going on in that time in you and Silas' world, but I do know that was, I don't know if this was coming out, but I know me and my people were working on records for Dirty Money and Danity Kane, right? We were trying to make those. For y'all that don't know, placements is when you demo records and you create references and you give them to the actual artist, which is pretty much an example of how the record should go. So we were cutting records heavy, a lot of pop records going on back then. And we were trying to make some of those albums. So now we had no subject or nothing. We were just talking pop. So I put the beat on. There was nothing on there. and I have no idea how y'all got there. And Silas remembers the record a little bit, but he said there's a backstory to it.
So I think, well, here's the thing. At that time, I was still very much Detroit. Okay. And my friends will tell you I'm usually the friend. I've never been that person for myself. Like I've not really been the crash out girl for myself. Mm-hmm. But for my friends, I have almost always been their crash out friend, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these things happen allegedly. And so, but I was usually the one that they would call at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and go, girl, you did it. And I would go, okay, bet. I have grown. Okay. I'm so much more calm now. I've gotten to be a much better person. And so I had a lot of material to pull from, right? Both from myself. I didn't always have the best situations and relationships, which make for great music. Terrible personal life, but great music. And then also I had all of these situations from friends as well that would let me kind of like pull from those emotions, because music is very emotional for me. And so I was able to like pull from those emotions. So it's no telling. It's possible. Yes.
Can I ask you this question? Do you know where you get that? How do you know where that derived, where you could pull from? Because we're a lot alike. I can pull from any conversation that I've had with anybody and interpret it through music. But I know so many people that wait to go through something before they can write a record. It stops them. And I'm not knocking, I'm not saying anyone's better than the other, but where do you get that from? I don't know where that comes from me. I feel like I have to do it, but I don't even know where I got that. Like, is there an answer for that for you?
I think that my love, and I tell people a lot of this. I think the reason that I love music is because I actually love words.
Mm-hmm.
Words.
Ooh, okay.
I love music so much because it's one of the, it's almost the only art form other than poetry that it is specifically about the words. Right. So I'm one of those people that reads constantly. Like you can't see it right now, but like my office is lined up with books. My studio is lined up with books around. I got books everywhere. And even as a child, I was like constantly surrounded by stories. And so I was writing stories when I just let my mind come up with whatever the story was going to be. And so making music and writing was no jump. There was no leap for me. It's just that I get to create in that moment, whatever it is that I feel like writing about. But it's just a story because I love the words. It just, I like putting it to a song where you can sing it. And so it allows me a lot of freedom to be able to write, but also just in general, sometimes I think people mystify writing music and don't understand that it is 100% a skill. Now, there are some people that are just absolutely amazing at doing it, right? And so they may not have to work to get that skill, but there are so many different ways that you can just learn to be a songwriter, right? And this is coming from the kid that believed that she had to have every single skill and have professional level knowledge of every skill, right? Because I got tired of, we'll probably talk about it. I got tired of talking in the studio and not being able to have a conversation with the engineers. So I went to audio engineering school, right? Like that was me, right? So the going to books, I have songwriting books. I have, all kind of online classes and stuff that are just about how to put together a lyric, how to quickly write a lyric, 5-minute practices that you can do to just say, pick an item, you write for 5 minutes and you stop and then you go back and read it, right? So it's a skill. It's not just about, and so if you're sticking yourself in I gotta feel this thing or I have to live through this thing, you are actually choosing to make yourself fail and you don't have to. That is a coping mechanism. You're waiting for some inspiration and you don't realize you're walking around with it every single day because it's a skill to do it. The words are always the words. So
you just helped me because I never looked at it like that. And I'm a word person. And people always say it because I'm like, well, you just said that, like, I'll repeat it. Like, you said this verbatim. So how do you expect me to understand anything outside of that? Or people be like, you're so black and white. I'll be like, but you heard what I said, though. You understood what I said. I don't do gray area because that's miscommunication and confusion. So now I've had to apologize a lot over the years because people have always called me an a-hole. And I get it, but I never meant any malice behind it. I just wanted to get my point across. But to your point, I was very particular with words. I would think I was the only kid in my mother's household for so long. So I would play situations over in my head before they ever occurred. Like, how would I respond to this? How would I say, nah, that sounds a little too rude. Don't say that. So that makes sense. I actually have been creating a story over my whole life. I just didn't do it in song form. But when it came time to do songs, I was able to, all right, cool, I can pull from this. All right, anyway, back to the, so you had the situation with your girls. Now, again, talking to Silas, I'm sorry, I'm super hyped now. I'm understanding all of this. Silas comes from an opera background and performing arts and things of that nature. So this is what makes the song playful, right? But you're in there cutting vocals and you're doing your own harmonies and vocal arrangements. So how did that come about? It's just a feeling when you, like, if I rock, because I played some beats for you, and you was like, nah. And I'm like, all right, we gonna find it, right? So how do you go through that process where you know, like, how to find the harmonies, you know what worked for you, what you gonna write for? And I guess I'm talking about that particular record. How did you put that together, if you remember?
So now these are the points where people do mystify it, and sometimes it is a little bit of magic, right? Like, you don't really know that you are doing a little bit of magic there when you're coming into that creative zone. When I hear a song, I will hear the song, right? Like, I will actually hear. I may not have the words, but I will hear, oh, this goes here, that goes there. And once I get to the point where I have heard that part in my head, it's a song. It's done now. We've gotten it. I just got to figure out what words it is that I want to put with whatever it is that I'm hearing in my head. Now, the harmonies and being able to do that vocal production really does fall in line with number one. When I was much younger, there was nobody else to really help me with the harmonies, but I grew up in choir. And so you always had to find my alto, right? And sometimes contralto, technically contralto, but you always have to find where you're supposed to be. And so being in choir from 5 years old, you get an ear, right? You that relative ear of where you are in relation to the people that are singing next to you, you will learn that as a skill. And so doing choir, we sang with Kirk Franklin for for a second, right? You learn kind of like the relativity of that scale and everything else. And then I went to school, and so I understood the scales. I may not have been the best person at sight singing, but I could figure it out, right? And I know what these keys are. I kind of know where the harmonies could go. And I know if I just stay in these sharps and flats, I can probably make all of this match together. So it's kind of that merging of that mystical side of making music, where it is just about the creative spark that comes about and the amount of skill that you have to be able to make what you hear become what you hear in the recording, right? That's where that starts aligning. How much skill you put in that you actually been working on technically versus the part of it that is kind of the magical part where people are like, how did you come up with that? I don't know. That's what I heard. So I just did it. Yeah.
No. So it's crazy. I was just talking to my students yesterday about hard work, and this is a testimony to that. So when you have 3 hard workers in a room and they're all really good, like we've all carved, like we ain't leaving there till we end up with something dope, you get something like that. And the reason why I say something like that, because that record, I don't know if we did that in 2010, 2008. It's old, but that record could come out today. I tell people this that don't know me, that want to have conversations with music, because I'm a lot like you. Again, when I work corporate jobs, I ain't tell nobody I did music. I don't tell them no stories. And even when people will bring it up, I ain't talking about it. Like I deal with this away from here. I don't want to talk about it here. But we were talking about the hard work, and the 3 of us in the room, the record being so classic, the intent back then, that would push people away too, because I'm like, nah, I'm working with I work with Master P. I grew up with Rico Love, work with BMW Kenny. I work with these people. Now, I'm not telling y'all this to brag. I'm saying I know the level of quality and standard that we don't have our own sound, but I know firsthand what they looking for. So when I bring it back to you and I say this record ain't gonna work 10, 15 years from now, I would get a lot of people, and I would like to say maybe some of them were insecure, but maybe some of them just didn't see themselves there. And I also learned I never spoke to anyone about their intentions before we worked, right? Like, what are you trying to do? Because some people just wanted to be in the studio. And I'm like, no, I got people I grew up with that signed to Usher. Like, I knew I was going to do this anyway. And that's my new bar now, because I know for sure we can do it now. Because we all did our own thing on our own. It wasn't like we all helped each other, but I can get it in on my own. I can work my butt off. So if we in the studio, we don't all need to have that goal, but we all need to be on that level of work ethic. So with y'all, like I'll tell Silas, I didn't have to, there was no conversation. We was all on the same page. And I believe this is all of that. Like you said, the magic, all of that is how you do a record, and 15, 20 years later, it still sounds good. It's some things we could alter, but ultimately the record is a go. The content is not dated. You know what I mean? Where it's like, wish I hadn't said that. Some of these records do be cringy, but you know, you ain't gonna hit every time. And I that's a record that I continue to go to, because I love backgrounds more than lead.
Same. I spend so much time with them.
Yeah. So it's like, I was telling my brother, like, yo, you can spend like an hour or two just on a 5-second part, 4 bars for some backgrounds.
Easy.
And then like be happy with it and be like, oh, this is my part. And I think that's the dope thing about music. Like, so much you can break. But all right, so I was gonna ask, what trials did you endure? And you spoke about audio engineering, which again, I'm gonna speak for myself a little bit before you go. When I moved down here, I remember having somebody first, shouts out to Stro Sounds. He demoed Stro, I sat under them for so long. Him, Ted, BJ, they really taught me how to construct R&B the way that I'm going to say that they did it, because it goes to my point. I remember Stro came to my house and I had this song called Love Holiday, and it's horrible. Like, my vocals are horrible, but I knew the direction. So he sung it, and I was like, because Stro can sing. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but this ain't how I want it to sound. Like, it was no knock to him, but I was developing my ear. And then I also noticed when I started working with artists and I produced the record, they would go to engineers, and I didn't like the way that the mix sound, but I couldn't describe how I wanted it to sound. So then that's what allowed me to start. I'm like, okay, well, I gotta do this on my own. And I will always, when I lived in Virginia, I also worked at a radio station. I forgot to tell you that. I interned in Virginia Beach. But all of my engineers, I would pick their brain, because in my mind, survival mode, if you're not here, how I'm gonna get what I need to get done? So I need all of that. Tell me what you're doing and all of that. So when I got down here, I actually used it. Somebody bought me Pro Tools, and I'm like, yo, I have to break 50 tracks down and mix it. And I didn't think of creating a template or anything. It was just like every new session was a new mix. And I started to develop, like, I'm sure you're going to tell me a little bit of this, but I started to develop the way I wanted to hear stuff, how I wanted my vocals. Because it's like, no, I hear this vocal that you probably got on too. I need that up. And you know how that go with harmonies. But that was my introduction into mixing and getting records demo how I wanted them. I started to really find my sound. But sorry, I'm talking a lot. My question to you was, what were some of the trials that you dealt with during that phase of you either being an artist or demoing records?
So the number one trial that any woman is going to deal with in the music industry is that you are your prey, right? The men in the industry are absolutely prey too, but they're usually prey to the powers that be, right? So they can be fodder for the record labels or people that are trying to kind of, sign them in. But for women, just stepping into a studio can be dangerous for you. And not only just dangerous for you physically, it can be dangerous for your reputation. And so one of the main ways, and you actually talked about it, and that's why I smiled a little bit. One of the main ways that I would ensure that I was capable of having my reputation always be safe, but I was able to build a really good reputation for myself was to show up in the studio as if I have no interest in knowing anybody personally in there. And I would walk in very much straight faced. What do you need me to do? What are you trying to get done? Who is this for? Am I writing for a specific person? Do you want me to do the demo? Very much heavy on business, and I am uninterested in knowing you as a person, right?
Like you do with me.
And I literally, and so now when you were saying like she came in there and the energy was like, what is this? But what I had learned is when you come in that way, the men in the room normally will handle you differently. They will give you a little bit more room to be able to just be good. And then at that point, you can show your skill. And at that point, you can see whether or not you're in a safe space. And then after that, you can actually be yourself, right? But it puts you in a position where in their minds, this is Simone, the professional, and she has all of these skills and you got to work with her because she's dope. Right. Instead of this is Simone and she's really pretty and she got this physical attribute and she got that physical. And I think she was feeling my boy. Right. Because that will tear up your reputation in music, especially in Houston. And so that is really the number of opportunities that I turned down, or people didn't even realize that like there were major things that I would have been a part of, but I refused them because of my character and my commitment to upholding a certain reputation for myself. Because I was one of those people that was offered, I'll offer you, if either you can get $50,000, you can give me $50,000 and I'll break your record in these 3 regions, right? Certain DJ stuff, break your records in these 3 regions, or you can lay down with me for an hour and I'll still break the record in those 3 regions. And I say neither.
Verbatim?
Yep, verbatim.
Okay, let me stop you here. I'm not laughing at you. It's so insane to me coming from where I come from, not the city, but my moral compass, right? Let me say this to women and men because it goes both ways. When you attempt to step out of the business, 9 out of 10, it allows you to be away from that business forever. And what I mean by that is I can wholeheartedly say that Simone and any other woman that I've worked with, even when I was single, I never had anything to do with them outside of the studio. Now, maybe we might have talked or whatever, but anything forward, in my mind, me, MIC LAWRY, I can't speak for nobody else. That is going to tarnish a relationship that I wouldn't be able to come back to 20 years later and say, hey, let's do this interview. No, you forget what happened 15 years ago? And it's crazy because I was looking at an interview with Benny Siegel, I believe it was, and they were asking him if he had any regrets. And he said, look at everybody right now. And I hear stories and I'm like, man, I just was never one of them. I'm working on music and I have integrity about myself. So there is no one now, we all ain't work out as far as business goes or whatever your goals was and mine was. But the idea of the fact that we could never work again because I tried you in a way that made you feel insecure, I don't get it. And I'll say this too before you finish, because I know a lot of students will be watching this. The idea of a celebrity is not what y'all think it is. So when you get in the studio, I think the majority of the time you'll either see somebody overreacting about who they are, or you get the stripped version of them and it's nothing like you thought. Because you're in there so long, talking about everything, talking about family, talking about what it really is. And you're like, oh, this. And some people want to do that. No knock to them. It just ain't me. This is who I am. But I say my condolences in that regard. I grieve for you in that regard because I don't hear a lot of women say that when they talk about their woes. I think it's because it's so usual and so normal. It's like, you know that already. Nah, that need to be spoken about.
No. And that's not the only time, right? That's not the only, I was offered to be on a certain show about love and music, but I was told if you won't sleep with anybody that's a part of the cast, I can't get you on as an actual person. I gotta be attached to somebody. Best I can do is I can maybe get you in a couple of studio scenes where you're writing for X, Y, and Z artists. I can get you on there that way. And so what I want to be able to show to other people is that there's a differences between making allowances for you to be able to get opportunities and take action for opportunities, and selling your personal character to get access for personal opportunities, right? And you don't have to do that, which is why, and most people that had, done music with me over the years, they'd be like, yeah, she's super strict, but she's cool, right? But that's because they got to the point where I was able to vet them very well, see how they act, see what they look like when they're in the studio, and there's other people that I haven't met before. I watch all of those things in the studio, very much aware of how they act on a regular basis, what it's like working with them. Are there any situations where I feel unsafe? What do I have to do in order to ensure that my reputation when I walk out of there is that they say she's professional, she's skilled, she's going to give you exactly what you're asking for, what she's asking for, and you're not going to have any issues, right? And so that actually takes very much intentional work, because it is very easy to, especially, and I was actually talking to somebody, it is very easy to confuse a relationship chemistry and a music chemistry, because it's still the same creative energy, right? And we'll keep it that in that way because there's certain people that will be watching. But it's very easy for people to get in the studio and they're making music and think that because they have that sort of like, there's this tension in the creation there, that it's because it's a relationship thing. It's not. It's just what it feels like when you're doing music right. It's the same thing. And so it's very easy to slide into those sorts of relationships. And that was something that I was always like trying to be as strict as I could with myself, that the studio chemistry is the studio chemistry, and keep your personal stuff out of it, right? So that you can maintain a good head on your shoulders and do the work that you need to do. And yeah, that was probably that's your baseline, because twice is good. That's your baseline trial as a woman doing music. Everything else after that, like my situation with deciding to go audio engineering school, I did classical opera as a major for my undergrad. And I was in the studio a lot, and I realized that I couldn't have conversations with people that I'm hearing something in my head and I can't tell them what effect I want, right? Or that I want this background to be up here. I don't want it to be on that side. I want it to come back and then kind of do like an echo, right? You hear the echo whenever you kind of hear people, they don't necessarily know the words. And so I ended up, funny enough, going to Media Tech for an open house because my boyfriend at the time was thinking about doing music. And so I was like, why don't you go to this open house? So I brought him to the open house and I signed up for school. He went off and did other music and stuff. He actually did music pretty largely, but I ended up signing up for school because I knew that if I go in here, I can learn how to be the engineer, and then I can have conversations with my engineers. I didn't go to audio engineering school to become an engineer. I went so I could talk to other people to do it, which was insecurity, right? Which I was
smart too, though.
It is smart. It is smart. But at that point, it wasn't because of my smarts. It was 100% because I felt like this is a whole new set of skills that I have to have so I can prove that I deserve to be in the rooms. Right. And so I ended up going to audio engineering school and I learned how to mix and master. I learned how to produce. I ended up having an easier path because I had already been an opera major. So when they started talking about the scales and everything else, I was just checking the papers off. Right. And then I also learned how to do sound for movies and all kind of stuff. So we learned all of those different things, lighting, live sound. And so I knew when I would have a show, I knew what to look for. If they didn't have the type of mics that I wanted, I could ask them if they had something else, right? I could figure out why the sound was weird in there. Can you change the lights from being blue? Black folks don't look good in blue lights like that. Please put the red on me. Get some yellow in here, okay? So we can have those conversations now. And then from there, it opened me up to be able to have really good conversations with my engineers about my mixes. of like being able, instead of saying, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's like full enough, I could say that bass in there is just it's giving a lot of vibration but not a lot of sound, and I don't like that. Can we kind of tweak this a little bit? Like I can have those sorts of conversation, and it upped the level of my music. And so when I started going to shows, doing shows and stuff, my music would sound a little higher than quality, and my performance, that at that point I only had to start matching my performance to my music, right? Then some of the other people that had not taken as much interest in learning the quality of sound and the mixes and everything else. And so it started kind of setting me a bit apart when I would be in those situations. And then I realized that people would like my music, but the performance is what would get them, right? And so because I had the music part down, I had a whole other set of skills that I felt like I
that's cool.
Get all the way at the top before I deserve to be in the room. And so then it turned into, how can I make my show look like I'm signed to a label and I have a machine behind me when it's just me, right? And so it turned into that. And I ended up, having a manager, a great manager, Legrian, or Lisa, as she goes by, ended up having this manager that had that same sort of idea of how do we make everything look like you are already signed and already at that place, so that it looks like a normal move for you to be there. Nobody is surprised that they're offering you this because you already look like you belong there anyway. And so that was kind of that step into it. It literally had most to do with, I felt like I needed the skill. And I also wanted to make certain that my quality could last next to the people that they were already hearing on the radio. I wanted to be able to say, if somebody was going to sing a song or somebody wanted to play my song on the radio, people wouldn't realize it is just from this little girl from Detroit that's just doing all of it by herself and figuring it out and asking people to mix for $100 and fixing their mix and having them be mad at her because she's being specific about it. That's what it ended up being, that I just wanted to make certain that my quality was there, that it was no difference. And so that's kind of followed me. I'm in a different place now with my skill level and, what my next skill of, now I got to get to this so I can be in the room, right? Now it feels like I want to get to this so that I make the room and I let other people be in it. I'm in that place now. But that's kind of where it was at the time.
We're gonna talk about you now in just a minute. It's crazy how much we're alike, because when I started doing the live scene in Houston, I kind of pulled one of your moves. I took two artists to a place to sing live because I know a lot of people here, despite it might seem like I'm nobody here, know a lot of the people. So I got them a situation to sing live. I felt like they could thrive the best, and they didn't do it for whatever reason. So I'm like, well, forget it. I'm gonna do it myself. I ain't never been a vocalist. I can hold a note. I've taught myself. So I started doing the live scenes, but I kept telling them, I don't want to do other people's song. I want to do my own song. And that changes everything, because now the musicians got to figure your song out. Normally when you covering somebody, they already know. Yep. You know what I mean? They're just catching your key so they can match. You know what I mean? But for me, it's like, nah, I want to do my record. And I thank a lot of the promoters that did assist me and help me with doing that, because that wasn't how their program was ran. But nevertheless, I say that because I did it to meet people. That was the purpose. Like, I want to find the artists so I can write for them and produce for them. So it did work out, but I'm like you. I went around the circle to add more to the table. Now, before we get to you now, this is a question I always ask my guests. You remember back in the day when they used to have the 5-disc changer that you would put in the trunk, put 5 CDs in there, and you just, all right, so here's my question. You're on a road trip. Let's just even say you're going back to Detroit, right? And you got that 5-disc changer in your trunk, and you got 5 nonstop albums that you have to listen to. So all you're pressing is play and next to go to the next CD after that first whole CD is played. No skip, no nothing. Don't matter the genre. What would be your 5 albums?
All of hers projects.
Okay.
If she has 5, then I would just put her in there.
Ooh, okay.
Straight up. I believe it's because I I genuinely enjoy the fact that you can tell she's an artist, but you can tell she's a writer. And so her movement of lyrics, I can listen to it one time just for the lyrics, listen to it one time just for the harmonies, listen to it one time just for the instrumentation. If she got 5 of them, I put 5 of them in there. If she doesn't, then I would put Silk Sonic. I listen to that one all the way through. For the same reason, you can hear the instrumentation. You can listen 2-3 times all the way through just to listen to the instruments, because some of the musical movements on that project are so underrated. Like just the musical movements of how they move the music through are insane. And so I would listen to that. I would put that in there. Who else did I put in there? I probably put Tweet. The project that has I'm done. I can't think of what that one it was. But that particular project, because that project I've already listened to for I don't even know how many different times. I know, let's see if there's any others that I would listen to and not skip anything. Coco Jones project. Now, funny enough, I'll make it 2. Okay. Her last project and then her Christmas album. Okay. I would do 2. So if I can't do the same artist twice, then I probably would throw Victoria Monet on there. I would do Jaguar 1 and Jaguar 2.
Okay.
So,
no, I think you answer how you want.
That would definitely be my, like, I can't skip. I gotta listen to each of these songs. It's not that I love every single song the same, but I would be fine with having to hear those songs on repeat and not stop until I get to a Buc-ee's.
Gotta stop at a Buc-ee's. Okay. All right, and if you could produce, write, vocal arrange, engineer, all of the stuff that you do, you could do it all to do one of them. If you could do that for someone that's alive, who would that person be?
Someone that's alive. Who would I want to hear say my words? I would absolutely write something for Jasmine Sullivan, because I would just like to see what my sometimes popish writing sounds like with her soulful voice. Like I would kind of like to see how that diametrically kind of opposes a little bit there. So I would definitely write for her. I'd put, everything together for her just to be able to see, like, how does that mesh and what different things do we get out of that? I don't actually want to write for her. I would like to write with her. Does that make sense? So I would like to actually sit in a room and say, okay, what do you hear here? What do I hear? To just see what her process is in an environment that's comfortable. Right. So I would probably go with her. And then who else?
That's dope while you thinking. That's very unselfish of you. Like, that's dope.
Yeah, but that's it. Because again, words, right? I'm in love with the words. So I kind of want to see what that sort of process looks like. I'm trying to think. A lot of the other stuff I might like quietly write for a rapper, because I do ghostwrite. Like a lot of people know me as rapping. They get surprised when they hear me singing.
Who would you ghostwrite for? Let's talk about it.
No, I can't talk about that. But just
you can't. Yeah, obviously you can't talk about it. But I mean, who would you do it for?
I definitely would like. I would write for maybe like a Cardi. I would like to write for a singer that thinks they can't rap. That's what I would want to do. So like somebody that's like, you actually would probably have a really dope rapping voice. I don't even really know who that is, because a lot of those singers aren't rapping. But if I could find one that's like, you really got a good rapping voice, you just don't realize it, I would probably do something like that. I would put things together for that, folks. Because that's kind of where I started with, was rapping. But they told me that wasn't very ladylike. So I did my singing, but they
So, okay, this wasn't even in the joint. I didn't have this as a question. Would you ever put a rap EP out?
I have.
I gotta hear it. Like, in most recent or no?
No. So what I usually do is I will do a singing project, and then I'll do rap, and then I'll do singing, and then I'll do rap. And so I think because I've like swapped them out, I've like gotten people at different stages. So they either first heard me singing and then heard me rapping and went, oh my gosh, or they first heard me rapping and then realized that I could sing after the fact. And so I have kind of like these two groups of people that found me. But yeah, I did a whole project that was basically rap. That one was called Skye. And I did remakes of like song, like a mixtape. I did like remakes of songs that were already out, like classic, tracks and all of that, and like redid those, and I did my own. But yeah, rap and all of that, rapping, singing, everything. Yeah.
That's hard. I mean, you add that, so that changes my whole introduction now, right? But no, that's super dope. That's, again, I love these moments because I find out something different. Now I'm trying to hear your voice. Like, I'm like you now, I'm trying to hear your voice rapping. And I wish I'd have known that back then, because we could have collabed too. Because I used to like writing. I did some ghost writing too, but they ain't pay, so I say their name. But it was fun. I like working more for women than men, because women were very accepting and very receptive to, because I really dug into them. Like, let's talk about how would you say this? Like, I don't, because I can come up with bars easy, but it might sound like somebody wrote for you. I don't want it to sound like that. And I think men were more concerned with the fact that they knew I wrote for them. Yeah. Like, it's like, nah, this is just too good. I'm like, dude, like, this is why I would get competitive. I can rap better than you. Right? Like, it's not because you can't do it better than me. I just care more. I pay attention to, like you said, cadence, flow, storytelling, all of the stuff that make my favorite rappers, my top 5. I incorporate that into what I'm doing. That's what makes me like, I can't believe you said that. It's like, nah, I'm comparing myself to Face. And so that's a whole nother story. I just got hyped because I actually want to put a joint out right now, but I got kids. I'm like,
with the writing thing, my goal is always to shock people with the first line. And I got that from The Dream, that he would always say, like, whatever your first line is, you need to make that the wildest thing that you possibly can, because it's what pulls people in. So like, when you think about his music and that he said that, if you ain't got no money, then you gotta go home. Right? That's his first line. That fancy, like, it's that first line. And so with the writing, and especially with my raps, I try and say the most reckless part of my rap is going to be that first line, because I need you to be really surprised after you heard my 3 love songs in a row.
The other crazy thing to that is back in the day, when they would hear your record, you didn't have a long time to wow them. It would be that long. It's like, like if you go back to the Fresh Prince episodes, heard enough, boom, like, and as we develop, we understand why that it could be your first line. Like, you starting this off wrong. We done. So that makes perfect sense. Last question, right? And I was looking through your socials and I saw that you dropped a record, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it said it had been 8 years.
Yep.
I don't know if this had been 8 years since you had actually been in the studio and recorded, or since you actually put a record out. Which one of those was the case?
It wasn't. It was since I had put something out. So I got in a deep relationship in 2014. I was still putting music out, but I got married in 2017. And the last project that I put out was in 2016. It was literally the year before I got married. And then you go through marriage, and I had a baby, and I went through a level of postpartum anxiety and depression, all in that. And then when the pandemic hit, I went through divorce, decided that I wanted to leave the marriage, and now I'm going to be a single mom, right? This mom all by myself and a divorcee. And I've gone to, that song was recorded new, but the other song that came out in November of last year is a song called Selfish. I started writing that song and recording that song right when I went into postpartum depression. So that would have been around, well, I was like kind of coming out of it. That would have been anywhere between 2019. I think that would have been around 2018, 2019 that I went into the studio and I wrote and started writing and recorded Selfish. And then in 2020, as I was starting to gear myself up for divorce, I finished writing it and recording it, but I didn't put that one out first. I ended up coming back. I worked with Bam. Hey, Bam. I worked with Bam, and we put Sorry together, which was just about expecting more. I'm sorry, we put Better together, which is expecting more. So with Better, that was a song that I ended up releasing first because I felt like it really set the tone for how I am now, which is, it's always going to be, if you feel like this ain't where you want to be, you can go, right? I can get better. I can deserve better. And I kind of wanted that as that fresh start. But it had been 8 years since I had actually put any music out. And that was the first time in a long time that I had been heavy in the studio with other people, right? I had been recording myself a little bit here and there, but it was really rough going through all of those other things and trying to create, like, going through the pandemic and trying to survive. And then also going through a divorce and a nasty divorce, right? With all kind of other stuff that's going on. And then after that, also trying to create, it gave great fodder because I was actually recording a different project at the time, which I do have those songs, but we'll see how that goes. But I was recording a different project at the time. But I just couldn't get to the point of putting it out. It just didn't feel right. The things weren't working out the way that I wanted them to. And so when I got to Better, it just felt right. It felt like it was the right thing. And Bam is the reason why I started recording again. I started producing again, is 100% because Bam basically told me off and made me cry in the studio. I'm going to tell on you, Bam.
But a good cry. It was a motivation.
To believe in yourself, and you're done with the version. Speaking of all the things that we've talked about, the version of you that believes that you're not talented, that you do not have enough skill, that you have to learn all these things and have to get all these technical skills in order to make good music, that's done. You're past that now. Get past it. You got everything that you need. Go make good music and put the songs out. Stop making the songs and not putting them out, right? And hearing that from this other person that I just genuinely respected and care for as a person, right? Because if anybody that's worked with Bam knows, Bam gonna take care of you, okay? He gonna fuss at you, but he gonna take care of you. And so hearing that from him, where he's worked with all of these different vocalists, all of these different rappers, and hearing that he believed that I was very talented and very capable and I could actually make good music, really did make me look at myself, right? And say, okay, where's all of that coming from? And why are you still holding on to that idea, right? And from there, I went, okay. He said, you need to go and produce. And I made my first track and I let him hear it. And he was like, this your first track that you made? And I said, yeah, this is the first one. And he was like, don't come back in here talking about you don't know if you can do this stuff. This is ridiculous. Get out of there. Go put some more music out. And so since that time, I've just been in the studio drilling myself on production, and I'm fighting with a song right now, mixing it. But I'm gonna do it. I'm absolutely doing it, and I'm putting those records out and everything. So
I'm proud of you. That's growth, that's healing, that's being better, right? Yeah. And that's putting everything in a pot now, where you've written, you've vocal arranged, you've rapped, you've produced, you've mixed, like it's all full circle. And then it's going to be the way that you hear it, unless Bam has anything to say. You know, your ear. So you're doing it on your terms. This is probably the final question, and I just thought about it while talking to you about this. Why do you think a lot of us in Houston did not do things together and just say, forget the labels?
I think we did. Because I mean, just think about it. In the conversation, the names that you mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, I did this song with them. I did that song with them. I don't think, and I know that storyline can kind of permeate places, but sometimes it's just that those are the loudest people. They're not the majority of people, right? We worked with each other. Like in Houston, the amount of folks that's like, oh no, we work with everybody. Everybody has probably gone through Bam's studio. Everybody has probably talked to Mike. Everybody has, you know what I mean? Like, you literally can say, I know all of these people. I know all the shows that they were going to. We all did kickback Sundays. Like, we worked together. What I think the difference is that we do not have the machine for output to put it out to other places that those other places that look like everybody works together have. That it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not we're working with each other. We're all friends. We all know each other. If we showed up to one show, we would probably at least know 10 people in the room, right? Even if I haven't met everybody, I know somebody that knows you. I think that unlike Atlanta or a New York, honestly, some places like they have some machine there, and like LA where they have some machine there, there's not that distribution hub where everybody goes and says, here's my good music. These are the good artists, and this is what we're going to push out yet, right? It's starting to happen, and that happens with like groups like Loud, right? With Loud music, like that thing is what Houston doesn't have. But I know that that's sometimes the story, but it's easy. That's a cop out, right? That's a cop out. And it actually stops us from being able to take the power that we do have, which is, who said we have to do all of that for other people? Texas is huge, right? And to be quite honest, everybody wants to be in Houston. They're going to come and find our stuff anyway. They're going to come down for a Sunday fun day, and they're going to hear our songs. If we have the infrastructure to play our stuff here, they're going to hear it here, and they're going to bring it back to where they were. They're coming here to listen to it anyway. So I think we do work with each other. We just have to really figure out how to build the machines that those other places have, where we're just going to put out music and it's a label and a crew, right? Like, everybody might not be signed to these folks, but everybody is working through it. And we had that, right? In Houston, there was those different groups, and maybe they got into other things and became other situations. But I think that's really what it is, because we work together. We really
do. I agree. As seeing the people that I saw when I first moved down here, and then I looked at them, so I had them on a pedestal, because we had no live scene back in Milwaukee, and it wasn't in Virginia either. So to see these people and then to work aside with them, and like you said, they would allow me to write, to co-write. Back then, I couldn't sing to save a lick. They were the vocalists, but like you said, the togetherness was completely there. That's a good point. Like the togetherness and partnership of Houston, even though, like you said, it's not seen like others appear to be. I never thought of it like that.
Worked 100%. And I know that just because we can have conversations like this, and those people pop up, and you're like, yeah, and they work with such and such, and they work with such and such, and I ended up writing this song with them, and I wrote this song with them. That is working together. It's just we don't have the machine yet here in Houston. I think if we focused in, we would have to be a little selfless at times, right? And be able to say, okay, it might not necessarily be me being the loudest right now. I'm not going to be the loudest artist. We're in a world now that we can release our own music, promote our own music without having to have somebody else do it. And so you'd have to buckle down, right? And say, I'm going to support the group that's trying to build a machine, right? At this point, it's like Loud. That's like the loudest one, right? That's coming out right now. But like, I'm going to support their machine, and then I'm going to have to do the double work of going and doing my own stuff. I'm not going to put myself back in order to support somebody else's stuff. But if we have that number of work ethic, that amount of work ethic where we're willing to do twice as much work that we already going to have to do anyway, of selflessness to say you first, but have an expectation that we're pushing you because we believe that you have good character and you will do what needs to be done for all of us, right? You'll open the door for all of us after the fact. I think if we could figure out that sort of situation, Houston would blossom way faster than I think people even believe it could, because people come here and take our sound. They do it all the time. So that means that they're watching. That means that So we got it. Just a little bit of.
Well, this is the AM with MIC LAWRY. Simone, Skye, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for spending time with us and dropping your jewels and your story. Appreciate you.
I appreciate it. I'm so glad I was able to come and talk with you and hear that old song. It stressed me out because I'm listening to the melodies. So I definitely appreciate it. It was wonderful. I'm glad you had me.
No doubt. Take it easy. AM with MIC LAWRY.